And a lot of people don't quite understand it. Like, you play that night after night. It's just an energy that gets me fired up, and a glass of champagne.
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm pumped as always to be here with you. This episode, I had the huge pleasure of talking to Mr. Andrew Roachford. Now, Andrew had some limited time but still managed to fit us in. It is one of the shorter interviews, but we do pack quite a bit in. If you're unaware of Andrew's work, he has had a highly successful career as a solo artist, part of the act Roachford, which is essentially Andrew and some other musicians. But also, Andrew plays keys and does vocals with Mike and the Mechanics, and has done a whole range of other collaborations over his career as well. And we cover a little bit of that in the 20 minutes we do have to chat. So yeah, Andrew was an absolute gem. I think you'll enjoy this a great deal, and I'll let you jump in. Andrew, it's an honour and a privilege to have you on the show, sir. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm fantastic. A bit knackered from
Yes.
literally just getting back from Mechanics' nearly 50-date tour, but
Yeah. And tell us just very briefly about that. I mean, 50 dates is a big tour by any measure. So how did it go? I know you always get a huge reception with that band, but tell us about what that was like.
it was amazing. I've been working with Mike and the band for 14 years, but this was definitely the by far the best tour as far as how the band sounded and the audience response. It was just amazing.
That's great. And just very briefly, because we're going to move on to your tour right now, but
Yeah.
your keyboard rig with Mike and the Mechanics, how's that set up for you? I know you do a lot of playing throughout the show. How's that set up for you?
Well, I initially, because when I started working with Mike, I started co-writing, and straight away we got working together. I was on the keys and he was on the guitar, and he just liked my playing. And when we got to playing live, we got another keyboard player in who I thought would be doing, most of the stuff, but Mike just liked my sound, and so uh, I'm pretty much playing through most of the gig with the other keyboard player. The central parts, like song called "Let Me Fly," which is around the piano. When there's a piano and a vocal and I'm singing, I'm just playing the main piano, and the other guy is doing like strings and the stuff on top, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I generally play like electric piano sounds, and all the more synthier stuff and stringer stuff as the other guy, mostly.
yeah. And we're zipping through these questions, but your musical upbringing, Andrew, as far as what was your introduction to keyboards and led you into a career in the first place in a sort of short and sharp way?
Well, in a short and sharp way, I come from a musical family, and my uncles and my dad and everyone used to rehearse in a living room. There was always a piano. Wherever I lived, there was always a piano. And by the time I was young as 4, I started plonking away on the piano. And my mum said, "Yeah, he's obviously wants to do this. Let's get him some lessons." And it started there. I started out with a private classical tuition, for years actually, and then I got I wanted to improvise, and then that's when my uncle took me under his wing and did a little bit of work with him, which was kind of like jazz and blues. But the 12 bar was a big part of what that was about.
No, amazing. And so let's talk about your tour. Roachford are coming out to Australia starting next week, I believe it is. I know I'm coming to the Sydney show Saturday week.
Yeah,
It's been a while, I think, since you've been to Australia.
it's been a few years. It's been a few years. I mean, I've done like the odd thing over there. I've even done some writing in Sydney, uh, and did a bit of co-writing with Jimmy Barnes of all people. And so I like going over, but I haven't been there for some years now. Especially not with my band, my musicians that I'm bringing over. And really doing some of the older stuff. I was doing a lot of my more newer stuff as well when I was there the last time. So this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, look, and
Mm.
let's talk a little bit about the tour, and obviously it is a greatest hits tour. But your most recent album, Then and Now, I find it amazing. The continuity between your original work and this album is amazing. And you revisited versions that brought a whole new depth. How did you actually approach the recording of that album, and how are you sort of approaching this tour as far as that album goes?
Well, we approached it, I was in the studio thinking, well, yeah, I want to revisit some of the old songs, but with the new head, because some of those songs are like 30 years old and, a young Andrew, naive to the world and the experience that I have now, be interesting to hear me singing it with, my life experience. It makes a complete difference. And with my band as they are now. So yeah, that was part of the thinking of that, but also to tie it in with where I'm at now, because I think writing me, it's about a creative process and not just sort of sitting back and just playing the hits forever and ever. Yeah, amen. And so it was tying those things in so that people got an idea of who I am now as an artist. So that's what the main mission was. And we recorded it in a studio that was had analog capability onto tape and just to give it bit of warmth.
Yeah, and look, let's
Mhm.
use the song "Twice in a Lifetime" as an example. I know you've mentioned the analog equipment, so you use lots of vintage equipment and tape. How did that affect your playing compared to the modern methods you would have used back in the '90s when you were recording, I assume, digitally?
Yeah, well, in the 90s, I was still doing a bit of both. I mean, in the early 90s, digital was still quite new, and I remember I recorded an album, Get Ready, and it was mostly digital, but it was on a machine called a Mitsubishi, and you know, and I recorded two songs on tape, and they're still my favorite. Like Get Ready was recorded on tape, the title track, and I look back on that and went, I wish I'd done the whole album still analog because digital is still early days and it was crunchy, and 16-bit, whatever it was. But, and there's just something that about tape when you go away from it for years and then you start to appreciate it again for what it is because you at the time you looked at its limitations, the fact that it took so long to rewind a tape in the studio and you lost the top end and blah 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 and the dynamic range which digital had, but then now you start seeing the pluses of the actual warmth and the fact that when you listen to something that's analog you can listen to it over and over and again and it just has that same feeling.
Exactly. And I know
Yeah.
you've done quite a number of collaborations over the years. Are there any standout collaborations or other session work you've done with other artists that you've particularly enjoyed?
There's been a few that are just sort of turned up, and I'm like, how did that happen? Because it's just kind of random. Like I remember getting a phone call once from Jeff Beck of all people, the late great, who sadly passed away, and ended up in the studio, and I didn't really know that much about him. That's why it was weird because it wasn't like I couldn't lie and go, man, I've been following you. And everyone was going, oh no, Jeff Beck. If Jeff Beck calls, you need to get into the studio. And so I was a bit intimidated because I was thinking, oh, but he was such a lovely guy, and we got on so well. And we did a few sessions, and sadly we didn't really use much. Like on the Permanent Shade of Blue, a song called "Cry for Me." Originally, it was recorded as a big sort of full-on band track, and I was like, "Well, we've got to get Jeff in to do the solo." And I brought him into the studio, and we did some amazing stuff. But then when I actually got to release, I preferred just the acoustic version, and that became the main one, and that became the track. And so people didn't really get to hear uh, the version with Jeff Beck on it, but it was definitely again a learning curve working with him because he's coming from another planet, and he's a really amazing musician.
He is absolutely iconic.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
I'd be un-Australian not to ask you, Andrew, you mentioned about a collaboration with Jimmy Barnes. I have to ask what
yeah,
that was.
yeah. Well, actually, I listened to a track today that we recorded together and we wrote together called "Attention," and I thought, wow, this is actually a great track. I mean, I really love the energy of it and the the fact that again, me and Jimmy, a meeting of two worlds. I would consider myself coming from more the soul as far as vocally, and Jimmy because he has that high, edgy voice. Um, he does have soul, by the way. I hasten to add, but obviously it sounds like a rock voice. But then you put him in the context of what I'm doing and what we're doing, and it works so well. And we recorded a couple more tracks, and they're floating around somewhere. Uh, but yeah, I love. And then we became friends after that, and I'm sure he'll pop in to the gigs in Sydney, and
Good.
I'm actually working. I'm not bringing my drummer over on this tour, but we're working with Jackie Barnes, who's Jimmy's son. He'd be
Yes.
my yeah, and he's such a great guy, such a great drummer. So it's like family to me. The
Abs-
Barneses, yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you've mentioned great voices, and obviously, I'm thinking of yourself there as well. As someone
Thank
that
you.
started as a pianist before becoming known for your amazing voice, did you end up approaching your writing of songs differently when composing at the keyboard versus when you're sort of working with your voice?
I've always loved singing and playing. Obviously, I started playing first, but I would hum along to what I was playing. I was singing along. I've always loved singing, but not in public. So I was singing a lot longer than people may have known. I just was so shy about singing. And it was just something that I loved doing, and it was very personal. And because I am, I guess, a soul singer, it's quite, when I sing, I'm quite revealing myself because there's no other way for me to sing, you know, and so I struggle with that. But my uncle got me into singing more because he basically bullied me and went, "You're going to sing at the gig," and I was like, "Okay." But in the studio, to be honest, I still struggle in the studio with being separated from the keyboard and just being the singer with headphones on is just not. It still doesn't natural for me. When I was doing the Mechanics album, I was standing in the recording room with the speakers on and a microphone, and everyone thought it was bonkers. But I just wanted to get the feeling of a gig. I'm a live artist, so yeah, it's still an ongoing thing. I still have producers coming up to me going, "If we can just capture that thing that you have live." It's such a sort of hard thing to capture in the studio. They go, we have a gold mine there. So
Love
I'm
it.
still working on that. That's still yet to come.
And actually, you've raised a good point there. I mean, obviously, you're well into your career, and we all learn things. What do you feel you still have to learn as a singer or a player?
Well, so much. I mean, as a human being, how far down the line can you say you are? I mean, when does it get to the point where you say you're there? I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm right at the beginning, in a sense. Every time I turn a corner musically or vocally, I go, "Wow!" I feel like I've just started to learn, or I hear someone who's amazing keyboard player, uh, and I mean, like the guy that plays with mechanics, he's got great technique and the way he can work keyboards as far as technically um, merge sounds and everything. It's an education to me, to get into the technology of it, because I started off as a purist. I was just playing piano or a Wurlitzer or a Fender Rhodes. I didn't get into synth things as much, and I'm quite intrigued by it, you know.
Yeah, no, great
You
point.
know.
And so I know you're short on time, Andrew, so I'm just going to launch into a couple of our last standard questions we ask all our guests. So is there a time, no matter what band, where you've had a massive train wreck on stage that you can look back and laugh on now?
Man, there's been times where things have, I wouldn't say massive train, but I've definitely fallen over a couple of times, trying to jump up to the drum riser and not quite making it. Once I did that and I knocked my shin, and because I had lots of adrenaline in my body because I'm on stage, I didn't realize I'd gashed my my shin open, and all the audience were kind of going, "Well, that's mad," his trousers are turning red, and
Yeah, wow.
uh, and then when I got off stage, they had the ambulance waiting for me, and I didn't know why. And then the pain hit me, and I had to go get stitches and whatever. But I wouldn't call it a train wreck. It's rock and roll. I've
Yep.
had mics drop out of my hand and into the. I mean, but it's all. I don't take myself seriously enough for it to be a train wreck. When you don't take yourself too seriously, in that way, the audience are behind you, so they're not looking at you going, "Oh, look at you, you're an idiot." They want it to work. They want it to work for you.
That's right. No, great
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
Another question we always ask, Andrew, is to tag a keyboard player. So is there a keyboard player out there that you've admired that you would love to hear more about their story?
I mean, there's loads of keyboard players. I'm oddly enough a frustrated guitarist in a keyboard
Yeah.
player's body, but I've always loved Herbie Hancock because,
Yeah.
again, growing up listening to Mr. Hand's album, which is the first thing I got introduced to, and it's like that guy's got so much feel, and this is the main thing that's important to me. I mean, technique, whatever, you can learn technique. You can't learn feel. You can't practice feel and learn it. You either got it or you don't. And he's one of those people. And again, Stevie Wonder, um, amazing feel. The way he plays Superstition, I'm still trying to emulate to this very day. And it's a very particular thing. And I haven't heard many keyboard players that can play it like that.
No,
So there you
great
go.
picks. Yeah, no, great picks.
Yes.
And when we
Mm.
have our dreaded Desert Island Discs question, Andrew, so 5 albums. If you only had 5 albums to take to an island, what would they be?
Oh my God. Well, talking about CV, it would have to be Talking Book. I mean, everyone talks about songs in the key of life, but every album of Stevie's amazing. But Talking Book is my heart right there. What's Going On, Marvin Gaye for sure. Yeah, yeah, Ladies of the Canyon. Yeah, Joni Mitchell album,
Wow.
or even her Blue album. Actually, no, the Blue album.
Blue.
Um, and oh my God, um, Jimi Hendrix has a smash hits album because it reminds me of when I was a kid and I got introduced to him. So that would have to be in there. And then Exodus, Bob Marley.
Brilliant picks.
Mm.
Thank you. And that's one
Yeah.
of the quickest. You rattled them off well. Our
There's so
last,
many, but yeah.
yeah, there is. Our
Yeah.
last question, Andrew, is what we call the quick fire 10. So 10 very short and sharp things. So first album you recall hearing as a child?
History of Soul, my mum's album, and vinyl.
Great.
And only because the girl on the front was topless. That's why I got into it. I was a
Love
kid, but
Yeah, no,
yeah.
yeah, valid.
Yeah.
Most important pre-gig ritual. What do you need to do to feel settled before you go on stage?
Well, I DJ for half an hour, and I play mostly James Brown, hardcore funk James Brown, and a lot of people don't quite understand it. Like you play that night after night, it's just an energy that gets me fired up, and a glass of champagne.
Love it.
No
If you
moe, no showy.
love it, um, Andrew, if you hadn't been a musician, what do you think your career choice would have been?
I mean, that's a good question. There were a couple of the sciences that, physics intrigued me. I've got a very scientific mind, I guess, and so maybe something in that field.
Yep, great. I
Mm.
think I know the answer to this, but transpose button or adjust on the fly if you need to change keys.
Well, my uncle always encouraged me to be able to play in all keys, but there's certain things that I just like the feeling of that key. So, um, superstition, E flat feels strange to play in E. So there we go, the transpose button. If the band are playing it in E, I might transpose button
Yeah,
it.
no, great answer. If it's possible, favourite gig you've ever done?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That is a real tough one. That is a tough one. Uh, I mean, I loved the first proper gig that I did when I put out my first album, and it was at the Marquee Club, which is a famous club in London in Soho, and everyone had played there. You walked in and you had the energy, like Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles. Everyone kind of started there, and I played the last gig. So after I played there, that was their last gig. It was closed, the club, and the poster stayed in the window for like a year. My poster, and just for the first time seeing people singing my lyrics back to me as well
Yeah,
was completely mind blowing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Favourite city you've ever played?
Woo! Nah. You know what? I always like. There's so many great cities. Obviously, playing in Sydney is a blast. Playing in London is a blast. My hometown. But when I go to Glasgow in Scotland, man, that roof, before I've even played a note, the roof is already off. It's already off. It's mad. It's my second home.
Yeah, there you go, Glasgow.
Yeah.
Name a song that you used to love, but you've now played it to death, whether it's your own or in another band.
I played it to death. Oh my God. That's a tough one. Um, that is a tough one. That's a hard one. I mean, I've just done so many dates with Mike and Mechanics
Yeah,
that some of those songs I could probably take a little break from
Yes.
doing, but I love them. But literally, when I say
Yeah.
a break, a couple of weeks and I'll be back.
Yeah,
Like
that's
over
right.
my shoulder. I've done quite a lot of times.
No, valid.
That's been done so many times. But then that's kind of the nature of when you have success with songs. That how many times has Stevie Wonder done Superstition? I wonder.
Yeah, that's
You know.
right. No, agreed. Your favourite music documentary or movie?
I always shock people because they think I'm gonna come up with something really intellectual, and I go, well, the first Terminator. I'm a big sci-fi guy. I have been since I was a kid. Before I even it was one of my things. And it was with books was sci-fi, and that's the most perfect science fiction film ever. One of them that and Close Encounters ever made because there's so much detail and they're so ahead of their time.
Great,
You
yes.
know.
I'm going to swap
Mm.
out a question then and ask you your favourite sci-fi author.
Oh, good question. I mean, good question. Um, I can't even answer that one.
No,
I
that's
can't
okay.
even answer that one because when I was growing up as a kid, I had. I mean, I'm talking about being a real kid. I mean, my mum was kind of worried, and she got me a library card because I wasn't into books, but then I got into it through this library card, but I was so young, so I wasn't really paying attention
No.
to authors. But I was so intrigued by the idea of future, and it's weird because I was intrigued by the idea of machines actually developing a consciousness and a feel.
Yeah,
And
no,
here
love
we
it.
are with artificial intelligence.
And just briefly, and I know you've got to go, Andrew, but what is your take on AI and music? What's your initial take on the threat or otherwise it may have for the industry?
Well, I think I was one of the last people to sort of take it serious. I was like, yeah, whatever. But then I had mates who are musicians saying, Andrew, man, you should check this out. Like this is writing app, and it will blow your mind. And there's these apps for sort of plugging for sound, and I kind of frowned upon it, but now I'm kind of going, hang on a minute. But I still believe because an artist that does soul music, which is mostly about feel more than it is about technique or notes. It's about feel. I said, I don't think AI will ever be able to understand what that is because we don't understand what that is. And I said, the day that AI can compose a great joke is the end of the world because it's so subjective,
Yeah,
culturally, whatever. So how can it know?
yeah, I love that.
you
No,
know,
good point.
yeah, one
Uh,
person's funny, is another person crass. Who knows what that is?
exactly. And very last but not least, your favourite non-musical activity or hobby? What keeps you sane outside of music?
Outside of music, again, of course, I used to like going to the movies, but recently the the output of great films has just dropped
Yeah.
dramatically, and it's really quite sad in a way. I hope that turns around. But I do love the occasional racket sports. It's just something that gets my mind off of music. So I'll swing a racket, a little bit of tennis, a little bit of squash. I played badminton when I was growing up on quite a good level, and so it's still into my in my body, if you know what I mean. Pick up a racket and I can still do it.
And look, I think it's fair to say you've hit many aces in your career, and there's lots more to come. We're really excited to see you out in Australia, Andrew, over the coming weeks. I know I'm excited to see you play live, and we can't thank you enough for fitting us into your schedule.
Bless, man. Thanks. I can't wait.
And there we have it. I hope you enjoyed that. As I said, it was a shorter interview, but Andrew covered a lot of ground and it was great speaking with him. And I am truly excited to check him out live in the next week or so. So again, thank you for listening. And I'd also like to give a call out to our gold and silver supporters, Mr. Dewi Evans from the sunny land of Wales. Thank you, sir, as always. The wonderful Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew in Canada. Thank you, Tammy, as always, as well. Mike and the team at midnightmastering.com. If you're creating your own music and need someone with a fresh set of eyes to mix and master, Mike is your guy. And last but definitely not least, Dave and the team at themusicplayer.com forums. Lots of interesting discussions on there as always about new keyboard releases, issues with gigging and so on. Highly recommended. Most importantly, again, thank you to you for listening, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. And until then, keep on playing.